so nervous, y'all. Okay, let's go. This is a love story. And like all love stories, it is about nothing. But it's also about everything. And also, like love stories, it starts with depression and a deep nihilistic sense of futility. I was living in Baltimore, and I had just failed like really spectacularly at something for probably the first time in my life. And I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and we just really needed a change. So I was like, okay, let's go west. I've been to Seattle. I loved it there. I had family there. And I had this kind of like cinematic American notion that the frontier was still the best place to go if you wanted to change like literally everything about yourself. But I was overruled, and my boyfriend was from Maine. So, I'd been here a few times, and a few things stuck out to me. Like I thought it was fine. It was pretty. The McDonald's in Freeport, which inexplicably is like in a house with like a little porch and shutters and like lights. And it just seemed like antithetical to everything I thought was true and good in the world. And I just didn't know if I could live in a place that had a McDonald's like that. And also the trees. There are evergreens in the Northwest, but here it's different. They're like really tall and lonely and kind of stark. And I'm a Midwesterner, so I like to see all around me at all times. Otherwise, I feel trapped. So we decided to move here, and we got on the road, and I was driving in my car, and there was a U-Haul in front of me, and I was in the car by myself, and I had this fantasy in the car of just turning left and turning left and turning left until I got somewhere far away from the place that I was. But I didn't. I kept driving straight, and I got here. And I had no plan. I'd been working as a bank teller for about 8 months, and had really like numbed my brain and soul that way, and was planning to continue in this kind of like cryogenically frozen manner until I started my real life and found my real job. And thankfully, someone found it in their hearts to hire me, despite that heinous millennial ego. And I got a job at an outdoor retail store, which, full disclosure, is one of the sponsors tonight. But and this was like impossible for several reasons. One, I only really went outside at that point to like get somewhere else that was inside. I was like a quintessential indoor kid. It was like maximum AC, minimum activity. And then the retail part, like I'd never sold clothing, and I was like really only barely like functional at wearing clothing. Like I was just like I wasn't good at that either really. So, but I got this job, and it introduced me to this whole kind of group of humans that I knew existed but had never really met. These people that like loved being outdoors, and not in like the outdoors wasn't a place that they went. It was just like part of their life, and it started to make me think about place and how people lived in Maine. And we got an apartment in Portland, and we settled in. And once everything had settled in, my life in the past year had like really been in flux emotionally and physically. And once I settled in, I realized I was so lonely. And there were all these cracks in my relationship that had formed to this point where I felt like I was kind of just like breaking off the coast of myself. I just felt alone. And I would walk around at night in Portland, and I would see these houses and these apartments that were lit from within and had people in them, and they were drinking and telling stories and having great times, and I wasn't there. And I'd go home, and I'd say to my boyfriend, okay, by Thanksgiving, we'll have enough people to invite over to a party. And then it got to be Thanksgiving. And then I'd say, okay, by Christmas, we'll have a dinner. And then it got to be Christmas. And I was like, well, maybe someone will invite us for New Year's. And then President's Day passed, and spring break, and Memorial Day, and a year passed, and I still didn't have anyone. And I finally asked this girl that I worked with and knew very tangentially, like, will you be my friend, and can you help me make friends? In this way that was like, probably sounded like a foreign exchange student. It was just like, this is not the way that adults really talk to each other, but she did. She introduced me to a few people, and I started to see this kind of like possible version of myself that was like living with me, this self that could maybe be whole. And I was on the ferry almost another year later, I was on the ferry in Casco Bay, and I was with this weird blonde Amazon who was really way cooler than me. And she was like, "Are you happy?" And I looked out on the water, and it was so beautiful. The water was kind of winking at me, and you could see the Portland skyline, and there were islands. And I just felt this discrepancy between the beauty that I saw and what had become my internal life. And I said, "No, I'm not happy." And in between swigs off of a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, she said, "Well, you're young and you're beautiful. Just do something else." And I was on a trip a few weeks later to New York, and I drove back. And when I drove across the border to Maine, it felt like an embrace. It felt like I was welcome. And I realized that it was not the place that was my problem, and so I ended my relationship that day. And that summer was an explosion. I went to my first party in probably years, full of people I didn't know. And people were old-fashioned drunk, and at the end of the night, people are happy, just happy drunk. And it got to the end of the night, and someone was like, "Let's go to the beach." So we piled in a cab, and we were naked and freezing, and we got into the water, and someone says, "Who wants a baptism?" And that became kind of the in-joke of the night, is dunking each other in this water in this kind of very irreligious ceremony, and people were laughing, but to me it felt real, because I was going to be reborn, and I was going to be a person with people. And I decided I was going to throw a party. And I still didn't really have any friends. I just knew a lot of people's names. And I was like, well, I'm just going to think of the first 30 names I know and get them in the same place. So I was going to throw this big summer party. I was going to line the driveway with tables, and I was going to have centerpieces and craft cocktail. And I did, and I invited all these people, and it rained the day of the party. And I was like, this is still my attitude. I'm still like this. I was like, no one's going to come. No one's going to come. No one's going to have a good time. Let's just pile all the tables inside, and we'll just do it however it turns out. And of course, everyone came, and everyone had a great time. And I walked outside at one point to dump this bucket of ice water, and I looked around, and I realized that my house was the one lit from within, and my house was the one with people laughing. And the past 3 years, have just been this time of personal geography on Peaks Island and in Machias and in this big, huge apartment on State Street. I learned how to make a family when yours is far away. And on a farm in Bethel, I learned what real food looks like. And on Knife's Edge, I learned self-reliance. And in Kettle Cove, I learned that it does not matter what ails you. A cold swim is powerful medicine. About a month ago, there was a bar in Portland that had retro nights. And my friends would go before they were my friends, which it's like thinking about your parents when they were young. It's what were you before you were what you are to me now? I just you must have sprung fully formed from inside of a bar. I don't know. But I went with them anyway, and we stayed up really late, and we danced, and it was so fun, and everyone was there. And it was the end of the night, and someone said, "Let's go to the beach." And we piled in a cab, and we were naked and freezing, and we jumped in the water, and someone said, "Who wants a baptism?" The same someone. Except I can remember actually prayer, I don't know what the word, sacrament, I don't know. I'm going to repeat it to you now. Do you reject the teachings of Donald Trump and accept our Savior Elizabeth Warren in the name of Holy Lemonade? Amen. So topical. And I got home, and it was 3 a.m., and I was soaking wet, and I was drunk. And I looked in a mirror, and I saw this look on my face that has probably been there for a while. I just never saw it. This equilibrium of joy. And it was the joy that the people took in the place, and the place took in the people, and the people took in each other, and the people took in me, and the place took in me, and I took in the place, and I took in the people. And I realized that the more I loved Maine, the more I loved myself. I am moving next week to the West. And I would be lying if it didn't feel like some sort of unfulfilled promise to that self that made that trip all those years ago. And someone said to me a few weeks ago, it makes all the sense in the world and no sense at all. And it makes no sense at all because this is my home. But it makes all the sense in the world because I feel like I wasn't going to say this, but it's just true. I feel like my heart changed shape. And like the north of it is a cold but fertile border, and the center is green and lush and wild, and the south lays wide next to the ocean. And there are tides and glacial movements and long unnamed roads, and there are places I've never seen and places I know too well. And whether it is by fate or fortune, my heart just looks like Maine. So really, it doesn't matter where I go. I'm taking my home with me. Thank you.